Hello! I hope you find this story interesting. Your feedback and suggestions are always welcome, and subscribing to the channel will be a great support for me. So here I am, sitting on the edge of my old couch in a room that was once a shared space for 3 people, but now feels cold and empty. All my thoughts turn to one horrible moment. I could not believe that this had happened to me. I couldn't believe that my wife, the one with whom I shared everything, dreams, difficulties, our future together, had betrayed me. Not just anyone, but my best friend. Yes, with someone I considered a brother. How did this happen? Why didn't I notice it earlier? Why didn't I seem to hear all those little bells that must have been ringing in my head? But unfortunately, all these questions became meaningless after I saw them together. And I came home after a hard day at work, thinking only about dinner and maybe relaxing with a cup of tea. I open the door and see her, my wife, sitting next to him. They were both so absorbed in conversation that they didn't even notice me. It was a moment when time stood still. I lost my sense of reality. My heart was literally squeezed with pain. They could not even say a single word to explain what was happening. Their looks, their mutual silence, were all I needed to realize that my reality had fallen apart. How could this have happened? How could the 2 people I trusted most in the world betray me like this? My wife, the one who built this house with me, with whom I planned to grow old, for whom I was ready to make sacrifices, was part of what I would call my world. And now this world is falling apart right before my eyes. When she just got up and left without a word, I was left alone looking at him. At the one with whom I shared my joys, moments of laughter, and even hard times. Like a traitor who will steal from you not only your peace, but also your faith in people. What did I feel then? I think it was more than pain. It was the death of a part of me, loss of not only trust, but also of everything I considered important and real. What was left after that? How do you move on when everything you believed in turns out to be a lie? Then I realized that I could not stay in the same place where I had been trampled. I had to change something. It was not just a moment of betrayal. It was the moment when I realized that my story and my struggle with myself was just beginning. Will I ever be able to forgive? Will I find the strength to move on? Or maybe my life has already changed forever. Maybe you think you know how it will end. You may say, it's impossible to survive. This is the end. But life is often such that it never gives you all the answers. And it is precisely at these moments, when it seems that you are on the verge, that you begin to find new strength, new opportunities to fight. After all, every injury is a potential for change, every loss is a chance for recovery. I was ready to test it. But what would happen next? Will I ever be able to trust again? How do you move on when your heart is broken and your world is destroyed? Where do you find the strength to start a new life after a betrayal? These questions will remain in my mind until I find a way to answer them. It is hard to believe that all this has happened, in that a seemingly perfect life, in which everything was so predictable and stable, crumbled into small pieces after one horrible discovery. And now my heart is filled with pain, and my thoughts seem broken and scattered. How do I start again? How to deal with feelings when every step forward is so difficult? Every day after I found out about the betrayal was like a struggle for my own soul. The first hours after my wife and my friend left me with my shattered world, I just couldn't believe what was happening. It was impossible to accept. I walked around the house like an automaton, not understanding what exactly was happening. Is this my house? Is this still my world? But some things have already changed forever. At first, there was a feeling of paralysis. I could not let go of these moments of betrayal. I literally couldn't believe that the two people who meant the most to me could make me feel so invisible, so powerless. Every time I tried to collect my thoughts, these images reappearing them together, laughing while I stood back watching. Every glance, every word, every gesture that I had once taken for granted had now become a symbol of betrayal. But after the first shock, the first storm of emotions, I gradually began to realize that I could not stay in this swamp. Although it was difficult, every new day brought new attempts to find answers. I began to ask myself, how should I go on with my life now? Is there anything I can do to restore my soul, my heart, my faith in people? The first few weeks after the betrayal were definitely the hardest. I walked around like a ghost. From time to time, my whole body was overcome with anger, then sadness, then despair. And every day was hard, and every day it was like endless suffering, pulling me down. But I was aware of one important thing: as long as I sit in this pit of emotions, nothing will change. At one of those moments, when I felt completely broken, a thought came to me. Why do I have to stay in a place where I no longer exist? My wife and my friend had decided to carry on without me. They had made their choice, and although it hurt, I couldn't let them live in my head anymore. They betrayed me, and I can't change them. I can only change myself. That was my first big realization. I decided that I would not let these feelings take over anymore. I will no longer give in to the anger that burns me from the inside. I would no longer allow myself to be vulnerable. I realized that in order to move forward, I had to pick myself up and start again. Especially since I now had more time for myself. My children had long since grown up, and most of my friends were no longer so active in my life. I was left alone with my thoughts. I could have succumbed to bitterness, but I decided otherwise. I began to look for new activities, new hobbies that would help me forget what had happened, at least for a while. And I started to rebuild my relationship with myself. I started learning new technologies, watching videos about the successes of people who had been through more than me. I returned to my old hobbies, reading books, listening to music that used to bring me peace. But the most important thing I realized was that I would not be able to find peace if I kept thinking about the betrayal. But it was a difficult decision, but I decided I will not blame them anymore. It was their choice. My choice is to move forward. As painful as it was, I still respected myself enough to start a new life, and the more I refused to be angry, the more I let go of the past, the more I began to realize that all was not lost. And instead of looking at myself as a victim, I started to look at myself as a person who was able to recover, get up and move on. This was my biggest victory, a victory over myself. And perhaps this is where true strength lies, a letting go of the painful, giving yourself a chance for a new beginning. Life after the betrayal was difficult, not only because of the pain that remained in my heart, but also because of the people who seemed to support me in these difficult times. I began to realize that not everyone around me was my friend, and that even the best intentions can hide dark sides. These were the first steps in a new world where every movement, every look, and every word could be a trap. I never believed that the people I shared my life with would be capable of such a betrayal. But life is not a fairy tale. And now, after I was abandoned, I began to see everyone with completely different eyes. My former friends, those whom I considered my allies, began to behave strangely. Instead of being supportive, they gave me advice that was not always in my best interest. Sometimes this advice was even strange, like some kind of attempt to lead me in a different direction, hiding their true motives. At first, I perceived it as a manifestation of care. But over time, I began to notice something disturbing. They suggested that I do things that could only make the situation worsey. Sell the house, start a new life. An old friend, who I thought had always been my support, advised me. But I felt these words did not sound the way I wanted them to. There was neither support nor sympathy. Instead, I felt some kind of purpose that they were trying to put in me. But I already knew that these people could not be on my side. Suddenly, I realized that many of them had no intention of helping me through this period, but rather manipulated my emotions to benefit from my weakness. My former friend, who was supposed to be my ally, started openly asking when I was going to sell the house and even offered to help me with the sale. This was not support, but an attempt to take advantage of my vulnerability. From that moment on, I began to treat him in a new way. Did he really benefit from this? If I sold my house, I could be left homeless and have to rely on his help. Wasn't that what he wanted? If I was left penniless, ruined, and alone, he would have more power to influence me, but I was not ready to give up so easily. I had to act and act carefully. Elections, I decided to be cautious and look at everyone who tried help with suspicion. I could not afford to fall into the trap again. At the time, it seemed to me that the whole world was conspiring against me. I began to see people not so much as friends as possible enemies, just waiting for make a mistake so they could use it to their advantage. But that didn't mean I had to be alone. I was still looking for a way out, and although it sounded a bit paranoid, I felt that my chance would only come when I could properly assess the situation and the people. And I began to suspect that even my closest friends could be part of some hidden agenda that had nothing to do with my well-being. And then another thing came up. One of my old friends, who knew about the situation, suddenly offered me help. She advised me to consider moving to another state, where I could start from scratch, where there would be no reminders of my traitors. But I also noticed something strange in her words. No matter how it may sound, I felt that this offer was not entirely noble. I tried not to make hasty conclusions, but every new step was like a test of my impressions. On each new contact with people I considered friends looked like a part of a game in which I was not just a player, but part of someone's manipulation. So, what to do in such a situation? How do you avoid falling into a trap? How do you not let your feelings become a tool for manipulation? There was no answer. But I knew one thing for sure. I had to be careful. I had to feel where real help begins and where new traps from which I could get out began. My thoughts had long been revolving around what was happening around me. Everything I considered stable and familiar suddenly turned into a kaleidoscope of lies, manipulation, and uncertainty. I was frustrated, broken, and even the people who seemed to be my allies were doing everything they could to keep me in the shadows. It was not just unpleasant, it was scary. And I'm scary because every new step, every new acquaintance left behind more questions than answers. And I could no longer trust anyone. Time was my enemy, and one night, as it turned out, I had the opportunity to find out who was behind it all. It all started when I received a message from one of my old friends, the same friend who seemed to be on my side. There was nothing suspicious about his message. It was just a question. How are you feeling? But something in that tone made me wary. I couldn't understand why he was showing such excessive concern now, when we hadn't spoken for a long time after I had experienced the betrayal. I didn't answer right away. Because, despite everything that was happening, I began to feel that there was something more than just human emotions and resentment. I began to feel that someone I knew was manipulating the situation for another purpose. But who? The next day I had a new surprise. The same friend came to me to discuss some business, but his behavior was so strange that I couldn't even describe it accurately. He looked like a person who was insincerely interested in my problems, but was clearly hiding something. We talked about general things, but more and more I noticed that he was trying to impose certain ideas on me that had nothing to do with my well-being. It was more and more like a game, but I couldn't understand who the player was and who was behind the game. After a few of these meetings, I decided to do something I hadn't done before. I started to follow him. I found out that he was meeting regularly with my ex-wife, as well as some people I didn't even know. Over time, it became clear that everything that was happening was no accident. I was part of a bigger plan, and someone who was very close to me had something very important in mind. Unexpectedly, I received another clue. Some unknown man started calling me, introducing himself as the new potential buyer of my house. Now, it might have seemed like a normal thing, but there was one detail: he contacted me without prior approval. How did he know about my intention to sell? And why now? This question became crucial. I started digging deeper. It turned out that it was not just my old friend who was behind this, but a whole group of people who essentially control how I should react to every event in my life. And my ex-wife was not just disappointed with my behavior. She was part of this manipulation. I realized that I was being used. I was not just cheated on, I was being abused with my own life. And it was not only financial manipulation, but also emotional. My ex-wife and my friend were part of a plan that I couldn't even see until now. They were playing a game, and I was in the center of it without even knowing it. And at that moment, everything became clear. That call, that annoying advice, it was all part of more than just a personal betrayal. It was an attempt to subdue me and make me do what they wanted. And then I remembered one important point. When all this started, my ex-wife often said how much she was worried about financial difficulties. But now I realized it was just a mask. So it was important for her and her new ally, not just to leave me penniless, but to take control of my life, my property, my future. I was ready to fight. Now that I knew who was behind it all, I had a chance to change the situation. But what was I supposed to do? I could just leave everything as it was, go with the flow, and let them get their way, or I could break out of this vicious circle of manipulation and prove that I don't give up easily. The whole situation reminded me of a trap. I was standing in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by people I once trusted, and on the verge of finally losing control of everything I had built. My ex-wife and best friend, who had turned traitor, had not only stolen my heart but destroyed my life, taking not only my money, but my peace of mind. I felt like I was losing this fight, but I had a feeling inside me that I wasn't ready to give up yet. The problems became obvious: money, house, future. None of this belonged to me anymore, and even simple solutions seemed unattainable. How could I get it all back? Was there anything else I could do? Was there anything I could get back to start rebuilding my life? One of the main problems was that I was overwhelmed by feelings of betrayal and terrible uncertainty. At the moments when I tried to gather my sanity, my emotions became an obstacle. Every step seemed not only a step towards loss, but also part of something I could not understand. It was like going out on a battlefield, not knowing where and who your enemy would be. But there was a moment when I realized that my real enemies were not only people, but also my own fears. I was afraid of losing everything I had. I was afraid that my life would never be the same again, and that any efforts would be in vain. But this was only the beginning. I realized that the most important thing is not to be afraid to move forward, even when it is dark and unknown. It was clear that solving the problem required more than just ideas or plans. I had to start again, step by step, and look for ways to change the situation. So I turned to people I could trust, not friends who had played a role in the betrayal, but those who had stood by and watched what was happening. And although each step was difficult, I began to receive important clues. An acquaintance from the past suggested a meeting. It was a small but important meeting, and he told me that he had recently received information about how my friends were manipulating my property. And although I had already lost a lot, he suggested that we work together to find ways to get back at least some of what I had lost. Those behind this situation were not invincible, and their plans had gaps, and I was ready to use those gaps to my advantage. And so, we set out to investigate. First, I started collecting facts, studying contracts, looking for legal loopholes that could help me change the situation. And although it all seemed like a huge and hopeless task, I realized that it was important not to give up, but to keep fighting, even if it meant working one step ahead of my traders. The next stage was the most difficult. I had to contact lawyers, talk to people I could use to regain control of my life. However, I could feel my strength melting away. It was an exhausting process, where every new day brought additional stress and new difficulties. Though each new step seemed even harder than the last. And then an unexpected obstacle appeared again. One of my old acquaintances gave me new information that my ex-wife and my friend had already signed a series of agreements that could completely destroy my chances. Their plan was developing as part of not only financial schemes, but also large-scale manipulations involving a number of legal entities. And I realized that I needed to act faster than I thought. I could not afford to stop. My fight was not only for property, not only for money, it was for my dignity and my freedom. I realized that life gave me a chance to get back everything I had lost, but I had to go through a real test to do so. My determination became my only strength, and although the chances seemed small, I decided not to give up. And so, I made my move. In the next part of this story, everything has to be resolved. But will he be able to find his place in this new world that awaits him? And who will be the real winner? The feeling that I was on the verge of a big change was so strong that it was hard to breathe. It seemed that everything was lost. But then, like a bolt from the blue, I received news that changed everything. And here I am, facing a choice that may determine my life. Life seems to have decided to give me another chance. It was a chance I could not even imagine. I was sitting in my lawyer's office, trying to find a way out of the situation, when a letter appeared on my desk. A letter from an unknown sender. It looked like a simple official document, but something about it alerted me. When I opened it, I saw information that cut off all my thoughts. There was new evidence of signature forgery and a conspiracy between my ex-wife and a friend to deprive me of my property and rights. These documents could have completely changed the course of the case, but the most interesting thing was who was behind it. I cannot say that I was ready for this. Most people would have given up, realizing that betrayal and deception were the basis of everything that was happening. But I was not like that. Over the past few weeks, I had felt myself gradually regaining control of my destiny, and now that I had new perspectives, I had to accept it all. It took me a while to believe it. It was too beautiful to be true. But the information in the letter was clear and logical. Was this a real salvation or another trap? And who could be behind this game? Was this another trick by those I considered close to me? Allowing myself to fall into this illusion would be a mistake. But on the other hand, why not try? There was only one for me to move forward and test this possibility. even if it would not be easy. But the hardest part was realizing that this was not just a chance to get my property or influence back. It was a chance to change my fate, a chance for a second life, but with new rules, new goals, and possibly new people. If I took this chance, everything I knew would disappear. My old connections, old influences, even those I lived with before the betrayal, could become alien, unnecessary. I felt fear. Fear of change. Of a fear that even when hope appears on the horizon, we are still afraid to move forward. What if this is just another sophisticated way to destroy me? How can I be sure that this is not a trap? But even through the fear, I realized that I couldn't stop. I spent all these years living by the rules that were imposed on me. And now the moment had come when I had to take power into my own hands. There was no other option. I could not afford to lose what I had again. I called my lawyer and said, "Get everything ready for the next step." These documents are my new life, and it was a decision I made without hesitation. The time for doubt was over. I had to act. But the question remained, would I be ready for everything that lay ahead? Was I ready to start a new chapter where all my connections and beliefs would be challenged? Everything I knew so far had already been put to the test, and now I had to go through what might be the biggest test of my life. A shocking turn had taken place. My new life had begun, but it was only the beginning. What would happen next? Will I be able to back everything I've lost, or will what's left be destroyed? And most importantly, who is really behind this game, and how can I change all the rules? Only one thing was clear: my struggle was not over, and even if I won this battle, I had to be ready for new challenges. I always thought that the ending was something obvious, the moment when you either win or lose. And even if I have to go through pain again, I will be ready. I realized that life doesn't stand still, and even through the darkest moments, you can find a way to the light. And even if I can't take it all back, I don't want to. My future is my decisions, my actions, and I'm not afraid to take steps forward now. And now I am standing here in front of you with everything that has happened, with every event that has swept through me, with every stage I have gone through, and with every minute when I realize that life does not give us more time to regret, but gives us the opportunity to move on. What happened was not just a betrayal. It was a twist that changed everything. Of course, I cannot say that I was happy about it. No. Pain and disappointment don't disappear like that. Sometimes, even years later, you suddenly remember how things were, how everything has changed, how this betrayal pierced your heart, but at the same time became the beginning of something new. Yes, life goes on, and you stand still, and it seems that everything is over, and then you realizing it's just the beginning. Maybe not the one you imagined, but still new. And this is, after all, the only path you have to take. It does not have answers to all questions, but it is your story, your struggle. I learned a lot, and not just about people. I learned to understand myself, my value, and my strength. I realized that sometimes it is important not just to restore what was, but to create something new. That sometimes it is necessary to destroy old ties and stereotypes in order to build new ones. And it's painful, but it's necessary. If you look at it from the other side, you can say that every day, every step and every small victory is part of a big process of change. And no matter how scary it is, no matter how painful, it always makes sense. But if I had not experienced these moments, I would not have become who I am today. Therefore, even if questions remain unanswered, even if the future seems vague and unclear, I am not afraid. I'm not afraid because I know that life goes on. You just can't stop, you can't give up. And yes, there will be new difficulties, new challenges ahead, but that's the point. Without them, you won't be able to truly understand what your life, your experiences, your struggle are worth. Hannah, what's next for you? Perhaps I'm not ready to answer this question for sure yet. Maybe there will still be moments of disappointment, or maybe not. Maybe I'll meet people again who will bring me joy, or maybe I'll face betrayal again. But now I am ready. I am ready to accept everything that life has to offer, and even if my answers do not complete this story, I know that life goes on, and this new path is my path. I am walking it, and what will happen next? Will it be happiness or pain? Will I find peace or will I fight again? These are the questions we are all looking for answers to. But one thing will not change in this story. I will not let life determine my fate. I will write my own story. And whatever my role in it, I already know that I will be ready. And this is probably the greatest victory, to be ready no matter what. No matter what lies ahead, I will go on, fight, and maybe find answers. Yes, life goes on, but what comes next? This is a question that has no specific answer. Everything is just beginning. And even if I have to go through pain again, I will be ready. I realize that life doesn't stand still, and even through the darkest moments, you can find a way to the light. And even if I can't take it all back, I don't want to. My future is my decisions, my actions, and I'm not afraid to take steps forward now. And now I am standing here in front of you with everything that has happened, with every event that has swept through me, with every stage I have gone through, and with every minute when I realize that life does not give us more time to regret, but gives us the opportunity to move on. What happened was not just a betrayal. It was a twist that changed everything. Of course, I cannot say that I was happy about it. No. Pain and disappointment don't disappear like that. Sometimes, even years later, you suddenly remember how things were, how everything has changed, how this betrayal pierced your heart, but at the same time became the beginning of something new. Yes, life goes on, and you stand still, and it seems that everything is over, and then you realizing it's just the beginning. Maybe not the one you imagined, but still new. And this is, after all, the only path you have to take. It does not have answers to all questions, but it is your story, your struggle. I learned a lot, and not just about people. I learned to understand myself, my value, and my strength. I realized that sometimes it is important not just to restore what was, but to create something new. That sometimes it is necessary to destroy old ties and stereotypes in order to build new ones. And it's painful, but it's necessary. If you look at it from the other side, you can say that every day, every step and every small victory is part of a big process of change. And no matter how scary it is, no matter how painful, it always makes sense. But if I had not experienced these moments, I would not have become who I am today. Therefore, even if questions remain unanswered, even if the future seems vague and unclear, I am not afraid. I'm not afraid because I know that life goes on. You just can't stop, you can't give up. And yes, there will be new difficulties, new challenges ahead, but that's the point. Without them, you won't be able to truly understand what your life, your experiences, your struggle are worth. Hannah, what's next for you? Perhaps I'm not ready to answer this question for sure yet. Maybe there will still be moments of disappointment, or maybe not. Maybe I'll meet people again who will bring me joy, or maybe I'll face betrayal again. But now I am ready. I am ready to accept everything that life has to offer, and even if my answers do not complete this story, I know that life goes on, and this new path is my path. I am walking it, and what will happen next? Will it be happiness or pain? Will I find peace or will I fight again? These are the questions we are all looking for answers to. But one thing will not change in this story. I will not let life determine my fate. I will write my own story. And whatever my role in it, I already know that I will be ready. And this is probably the greatest victory, to be ready no matter what. No matter what lies ahead, I will go on, fight, and maybe find answers. Yes, life goes on, but what comes next? This is a question that has no specific answer. Everything is just beginning.